I'd like to welcome everybody to the Coaches in the Mouth pod. This is Coach Jeff Williams along with Coach Bray Cook. Here we go.
New setup.
New
Coach.
setup. I'm in Ben's apartment. We've moved around, moved back here to the old poker table, looks like
poker
right
table,
here.
yeah.
Little cigars behind us, Al Capone, JFK. Got all kinds of things going on.
Ben's
down
apartment, not a bad place to be.
there. Great place to be off Dixon.
This is our usual home. A little different setup for us today because it's a little different podcast today, Coach. We have a Hall of Famer in the room,
Yes.
so I know we kind of had a plan, but I think we need to let's sidetrack this a little bit. I think this deserves to be talked about a little bit, huh?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if anybody wants to listen to it, but I tell you what, yes, Hall of Fame. We had a great weekend, and let's
Coach, we got a Hall of Famer on the podcast here.
yeah.
And it's fantastic. So, and I guess, I mean, when you let me know, it's obviously a huge deal. You kind of knew it was coming up, right?
Yeah.
Now, what was that moment like when they gave you the phone call?
It's funny, Bray, is I can tell you exactly where I was at. I was leaving Westville, Oklahoma, which it's on the border of Siloam Springs, from a junior high basketball game, and just coming across the border, and kept noticing getting this phone call from a Benton phone number, and it's Brad Harris. Of course, I got Brad's number, and what's Brad calling about? You know, football's over a little bit and that part, and he calls me and says, "Hey, Jeff," said, "Congratulations, you're going in the Hall of Fame." And man, it's a weird deal. It's like your whole life goes in front of you. I mean, from your whole football life is you start thinking about all the practices. You know, of course, my dad is a Hall of Famer. He's in the same Hall of Fame that I went in those days up there with him as a youngster, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, till getting off a bus getting home at 2:00 in the morning with him, and then obviously as a player, those practices and things like that, and then as a coach, you think about, I was at El Dorado for long, 8 years at Fort Smith Southside 15, and obviously got to work with you one time for 1 year at Pea Ridge, and you just think about all the men you worked with, all the players and all the coaches, and what's cool, we didn't get them everybody there, but we had a big crew there at the Hall of Fame. And one thing I'd like to do is just get every man that I've ever worked with in a room together.
Sure.
And just, it's never going to happen because some have passed, obviously, and just getting everybody together is impossible. But I think that's the coolest part because there's those relationships that you build, but just getting everybody together and talking about those old times and games and situations and what a coach said or what happened in the locker room, what happened at practice, the preparation part of it, bad game plans, great game plans, those parts, that is what I love about football. It's that locker room is just, it's sacred, and that coach's office is sacred, and the amount of time and the amount of hours and work and video, watching video, playing in practice, playing in game plans, all those times together, man, there's nothing like it. It's a grind when you're doing it, but football's a funny deal because I've been out a couple of years. It's like when you're in it, you never left it. When you're out of it, it's like you never were in it. And we've all been through that. I mean, you've played with players that either got kicked off the team or quit the team, and you still got a relationship, but there's just something different there. And football's been great to my family, and coaching has been, obviously.
Well, you mentioned so many coaches you worked with and all those relationships you built. But I imagine one of those first coaching relationships that you had was with the great, your father.
Yeah.
Obviously a great coach in the Hall of Fame, like you mentioned, a statue built after the man. What was his impact on your coaching career?
Boy, it was huge, obviously, and a lot of people had a lot of impact on my career. But obviously, my dad being a coach and being a head coach for most of my life, and watching from afar, seeing the backside of things a lot of people don't get to see. You know, the hurt sometimes, you know, with you know, a tough loss, or, you know, a key injury to your football team, or, you know, having to deal with a discipline problem, or you know, some other off the field issue. And, you know, those parts there, it's eye opening. And then on the other hand, you get to see the great victories, being on the bus ride on the way home, and, you know, everybody's singing, and you know, team coming together, and watch a group of guys form and come together. And my dad won a lot of games. I mean, Lord mercy, all kinds of games. And he had a relationship where I went to every state championship game since I was in 6 years old. I mean, we were going to be in War Memorial in December. We were going to go the first weekend. We were going to go the second weekend. We watched every state championship game that, you know, since back in the 80s, every all-star game we were there. Of course, Dad coached some, I coached some. But as a kid, that was the Mecca, War Memorial Stadium, sitting underneath the press box with all the old coaches and, you know, people, your friends down there coaching, or your idols and people that you looked up to. And that's the other part, you know, with my dad being around, that program was, the players were my heroes. I mean, those guys I looked up to. I can think about a lot of guys from Pocahontas that, you know, Ronnie Stockwell, Chris Baltz, I consider Benny Johnson, a lot of these guys, Lee Sean Brown, a bunch of these guys I could name that, you know, I looked up to, and I watched what they did. And I used to tell our players all the time, you know, when a coach had a kid out there, you know, one of their sons or daughter, they're watching that guy and, you know, those players, because it's eye opening. They're watching how they talk. I watched them how they warmed up, you know, what they did and warmed up, what their mannerism was before the game, being in that locker room, understanding the intensity, understanding that part of it, you know, getting the team motivated and ready to play. And I think there's no other sport like it. I mean, it's just football's an awesome sport. And like I said, I've been very fortunate, because I've also, with my dad being a coach, I got to meet a lot of great coaches. I mean, I've met Barry Switzer. I've got to meet, you know, Frank Broyles, those guys. He used to take me to clinics when I was a little guy. You know, I remember the first clinic I ever went to was at Arkansas State, and it was Clinic of Champions. Had every high school coach there, won a state championship there, and then we would go to practice, and coach like Mike Malham Sr., Larry Lacewell, those guys, you know, they knew who I was. I was a little, you know, Dave's kid or whatever, but I was exposed to things a lot more than a lot of other people were. I mean, you know, I could draw up a football play at age 7. You know, I could tell you who to block and what, you know, what it's supposed to be. This is the way it was. Now, everybody else was playing with G.I. Joes, and I'm up there drawing football plays. But I loved it. And I loved the organization part of it. I loved the team part of it. And just very, very fortunate. You know, great. I had 2 sisters, one older, one younger. I was that were, you know, just great with me. And growing up in Pocahontas was, you know, a small town, but it's a community that you just know what they are. I mean, you know, Pokey people are people that, you know, they're honest, they're tough people. You know, if you think you're a little bit better than everybody, they're going to knock you back down, let you back where you know where you're at. And it's just couldn't have been in a better situation.
Well, definitely some great people from Pocahontas. I know you had a couple of them there with you in Hot Springs.
Yeah.
A couple of the buddies. Opie. Now,
Yeah.
that was new to me. You know, where they were telling me, they're asking me, how long have you known Opie? Did you get to go to Pea Ridge with Opie? So, no, I went to Pea Ridge with Jeff. I don't know who the hell Opie is. But
Great story. It's and there's a lot of different stories, and there's a lot of people who take claim to that. When I think I was in the 2nd grade, and they were up there handing out equipment. I'll never forget it. And that was a big deal, you know, that they hand out equipment back in the day. It's a big deal. So we're up there, and, you know, and I'm throwing knee pads out or whatever, and I'd have a hat on, my ears would be sticking out. And I kind of looked like Opie Taylor a little bit. At that, kind of had reddish brown hair, and that. It's a coach started calling me that there, supposedly. Now, I don't remember. They always tell me the story, but they started calling me. Well, it just kind of grew, you know, and then, you know, it's kind of a little nickname here or there. Next thing you know, I'm in the 3rd grade, and the teacher's calling me that instead of my first name. So you're just trying to fit in, man. I've kind of knew you're just trying to fit in. So it ran with it. And I'll tell you, there's people in Pocahontas laugh. I probably don't even know my name's Jeff at the point in time. But it's a name that stuck with me. And I've got aliases all over the state of Arkansas. That's one thing about it.
No, one of the things that's so interesting in coaching is the butterfly effect of, your dad and the impact he had on you and all the players that played for him. And likewise, your effects on all your players, the coaches you coached with. Who are some of the people that you impacted, but on the flip side impacted you during your coaching career that you might want to thank?
Oh, man, there's so many. And you go back and look, and obviously, I had a great high school basketball coach, Rick Haygood. I mean, he was a guy that he was tough. I picked up things from all kinds of different coaches. He's one of them, he kept you scared in a way. If you weren't playing well, you weren't practicing well, your playing time could be adjusted. He didn't care who you were. I learned that from him as far as, keeping your guys on their toes and that part of them, being disciplined, being consistent. And another high school coach, Wellman, and a lot of my high school coaches were big influence. I went to college and played for a guy named Ken Turner for 2 years and a guy named Ronnie Kerr. And Ronnie Kerr, Coach Kerr's passed away a couple years ago. He took over as head coach my junior year. He taught me about competing and believing in what it doesn't matter what you look like, how big you are, you got to go out there and compete every day. And he had a big influence. Another guy, Perry Goodell, I played linebacker at Henderson my first 2 years. Ended up being offensive lineman my last 2 years, which was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Played for a guy named Perry Goodell, and he was, he'd always, I was playing linebacker, he used to, because I was kind of a little bit bigger linebacker, he'd say, come on home. Sure. And eventually wound up there, and that had the biggest influence on my coaching career because I was a defensive player. Now I'm going over to play offensive line. Man, I'm taking tools, put them in my bag as a coach. Been on defense. I understand what the defense is supposed to do. Now I'm learning about offense and getting played. I had a pretty good career, played with some great guys at Henderson. And then I'm coming out of Henderson and I'm fixing a GA there. And it's easy. It's about July. It's late in the year. And back then they used to have a coaching clinic in Little Rock. Every coach, AAA, put it on, big event. It was the last week in July and right before August practice started. And there's a guy named Scooter Rester. His offensive line coach just left. Coach Rester was at McClellan. I knew him. He was a referee. And then he was at McClellan, went to the state finals and went to El Dorado. And I remember going, I think, well, he's going to El Dorado. I didn't know much about El Dorado. I'm from Northeast Arkansas, Arkadelphia. Well, I went to, school there at Henderson. And he kept looking for me, his offensive line coach. And I was like, I'm not going to El Dorado. I'm GA, and, I'm fixing to, be the offensive line coach at the University of Arkansas. And Coach Register met with me, and they were preseason number 1, and we were going to the All-Star game. And I asked my dad, I said, what do you think? He goes, boy, you need to go to El Dorado. And I know what he was thinking. He'd get me off the payroll. That's what it was. Sure. And so I actually go into practice with Coach Rester hires me there at El Dorado, and I'm going in. And the luckiest thing ever happened, I'm walking in with 4 senior offensive linemen that are veterans and have played, and I've got 2 junior guards that rotated, and one of them started at UCA for 3 years. I had some good players, and walked in there as offensive line coach. Probably some of the greatest days I ever had coaching was there with Coach Rester. Coach Rester did a great job. We had a young staff that did a great job as far as letting us get out to clinics. Coach, I'd like to go see this guy, that part of it. And you build those relationships, and you're building, your craft. I'm about offensive line, and then you branch out a little bit more, learn a little bit more about this. But he had a huge impact on me and about organization, attitude, culture, those things. Coach Rester, he could get on kid and chew them out, and we used to laugh all the time. Then you'd see him, we'd have a track meet or something later on that day, and that kid would be down there following him around wherever he went. The guy chewed out. He had a great ability to do that, and we had a great staff there. We had Tad Stewart there, and Keith Fimple, Justin Key, Roosevelt Turner, Butch Gray, Jimmy Johnson, a bunch of different guys on that staff and we worked really hard, and but it paid off, and we wanted to be very successful, and we went to the state finals there, for Coach Rester's assistant in 2001, and got beat by Bentonville and learned a lot through that situation, and we were very prepared for down the road. But Coach Scooter Rester had a big impact on the way I coached a little bit and the way organization and things like that, and Coach is just a good man, and let us grow as coaches. He let us coach. He had thumb on us. He'd reel us back in. But he let us coach, and he coached coaches and learned a lot from Coach Register.
And I guess some of the coaches you've worked with, Tad Stewart, you've mentioned. Talk about your time at Southside. A lot of success there, a lot of big things. What was that like, and what impact did it have on you and your career?
Well, that was a kind of funny deal, funny time. I mean, we're coming off. People look at my record and different things as, my regular season, that wasn't our deal. We got cranked up in the playoffs. To me, that's the, and I know that sounds crazy, but I wouldn't really just get us in the tournament. Let's get in the tournament. Let's get going. That was kind of our makeup. We tried to win every Friday night in the regular season, but got in those playoffs. It's a one-shot deal, and we felt like we could have a shot, and so that was a big deal with us there. But going to Southside was a funny time. Coach Lunny leaves, and Coach Lunny's legendary Hall of Famer, one of the best coaches I ever coached against ever, and coached against him a bunch, at El Dorado, and also when he was at Bentonville. And he leaves, and Southside's a prominent program. I mean, it's a big time program. And it goes back to family. When my dad grew up in Van Buren, my mother grew up in Fort Smith. Even though I lived on the other side of the state, I was very familiar with North Side program and the South Side program, because I can't tell you how many times on a Thanksgiving weekend we were at Fort Smith South Side watching a playoff game, or over at North Side because we were visiting family. So I knew the program pretty good, knew the leadership there, and I think that's a big deal. We've talked to different coaches on this podcast about great administrators. Man, they can make a big difference for you and your program as a football program. And the job comes open. Jim Rowland's there, Wayne Haver, who's longtime principal, both of them there over 50 years in the Fort Smith Public Schools. So you knew what you were going into. And I'll never forget, the job comes open. I remember asking Tad Stewart, and I said, I think I'll apply for that job. And he goes, God, you're wasting your time. You ain't ever getting that job, man. He said, they ain't hiring you. And I'm probably halfway thinking the same thing, because we're coming off a 6-5-1 record at El Dorado, but we beat Sylvan Hills, who was a 1 seed in the first round of the playoffs, and got beat by Little Rock Central, eventual state champions that year, as one of the all-time greatest teams of all time. And it just works out. Apply for the job, and boom, interview, and it gets rolling fast. Boom, you got they offered me the job, and we're taking off. Me, Keith Fimple at the time, he was with us at El Dorado. They let us both have a contract. Bam, we're taking off to Fort Smith, leaving everybody behind. It was, just crazy time, because you're 5 hours away, And so we go in there the first year. We understand, Coach Lunny and that staff did a great job, ran a good program. We changed what we thought fit us a little bit, but, kept some stuff they were doing. Went through that year, learned a lot. First time going through the 7A West, and I'm talking about, especially back then, everybody was a one-school town. It was very difficult. And, go through that first year, miss the playoffs. Then the next year we roll in, and we got it. We're playing Bentonville week 9. Never forget it. We fumbled the ball going in to score with a minute to go in the game that would have put us in the playoffs.
Goodness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so now we got, it was crusher. It was crusher. I mean,
that's a tough one.
Yeah, it was. And so we got to go into week 10 to beat Northside to get the playoffs. And Northside was preseason number 1. Had a quarterback named Cody Burns. Had a few good players out there.
Sure.
And we played real well. And we won that game. And something about that game. And after that game, we won about 10 or 11 in a row against those guys. Mm-hmm. And something about that game, and you understand it being Harbor and Springdale, but it was week 10. It was like a playoff game.
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden, the confidence in that bunch of 4 seed, you could see it. Mm-hmm. They beat Northside, blah, blah, blah. We go into Little Rock Central, who's undefeated. They got a guy named Charles Clay, played in the NFL for years. Luckily, he had a bad shoulder, but he still played, and we're still jumping on his back trying to get him down. And we beat those guys. We block a punt with 2 minutes to go in the game. Howland Hargraves, boom, blocks it, lays on it. We win the game. And we got to go to North Little Rock's first year. They just took 4 of the playoffs, but it's first year they just went to 16 teams. So there was only 3 rounds. Mm-hmm. We go to North Little Rock, who's got a great team, and goes all our running backs get hurt. It's crazy night. And we end up winning in double overtime, headed to the state finals. We got to play Rogers. Rogers is they're undefeated. Cody Kirby, who's coaching in college, was a great quarterback, tough kid. Lee Zimba, they had some players. We had good players too, don't get me wrong. And we go to the state finals, and we're kind of, it's kind of like I told the guys. I said, look, nobody wants us here. The AAA doesn't even want us here. I mean, we're a 4 seed. Nobody. They only think it's going to be a game. Mm-hmm. But we played them earlier that year, and our starting tailback, who was leading rusher in the conference, was out. And they got up on us 21-0. We had to play some young guys. Came back 28-21. They beat us 28-21 in the regular season. So the matchup, we felt okay about it. Just had to kind of keep it close. And we did. And it was back and forth all night long, and we kind of got hot at the end. We take the lead. They go down to score with, I believe, 23 seconds left or something like that. And we weren't a throwing team. I mean, really. And it's funny, Matt O'Neill, who was our quarterback, who the year before as a junior, he got booed at Northside. We got beat as his junior year, and they booed him. The next year he comes back, boom, 4 straight, couple completions, boom, we kick the field goal, 2 seconds go in the game, we win by 1 point. Goodness. And that kid's MVP of the state finals. So you take a kid from 1 year ago that people, they were questioning about him being quarterback at the beginning of the year, and goes on to be a state MVP. Now he's a doctor who played baseball in St. Louis, and great. But we had a lot of great players. And after that, we had a good run. I mean, we went, I believe, there for 8 or 9 or 10 years where we were in the state finals or state semifinals every year. I think one year we were in the quarters. 2008, we go back to the finals, beat Harbor in the semifinals, go for 2 in a semifinal game. God, that's I think it's one top 3 most physical games I ever coached in. I mean, we tore the equipment up that night. And Harbor, they were just physical, and we were physical. And gets down, they're up 7-0, and we scored late.
The whole game. I mean,
it's the whole
Harbor
game.
Scores
first
series. It's 7-0 the whole game. And I was on that sideline. I remember this game. And y'all, go ahead and tell the story, but an unreal finish.
It was. And the funny part was Harbor was so good at goal line and short yardage defense.
Yep.
And we had a play in the first series, kind of faked we ran the boot or the stretch out of this one formation all year long, high tendency, came out and stuttered and goaled on the guy, and he caught it. And this is the first series, just what you're talking about. And I'm going, God, please get in the end zone. God, please get in the end zone. And he gets tackled on 3, and we get stuffed. We couldn't get it in.
Yep.
And I think we even turned it over. But we go down to score, in the fourth quarter late, like 8 seconds go in the game. And it's 7-6. We're done on defense. We couldn't play it any better. And anytime you get in an overtime game in high school, they put it on the 10-yard line. Who's ever usually can run the ball the best and who can play, and they were really good at goal line defense. It was easy to go for 2.
Sure.
And I think it was, we had Rick on talking about taking chances. This wasn't a chance. This was the smartest thing we could do because we went back out there in the overtime situation. I don't know if we win, and we go for 2. And Harbor actually makes the right defense call. I was talking to one of the defense coordinators the other day about it. They played cover 2. We run the old pick route. Everybody runs in the flat. And luckily, our guy was 6'5", had a cup of coffee with the Seahawks.
Sure.
Chase Dixon catches it, leans over. Boom, we're headed back to the state finals, and we're going against Bentonville, and we get there. And this is one of those games, that state finals games against Bentonville, no way, I regret. I think that's the one I probably sticks in my craw a little bit more because we had a good plan, and I didn't think I did a good job as a play caller that day. And, it just is what it is. It wasn't a great day. And then, matter of fact, the next year in 2009, we take the same game plan and beat Bentonville twice. They had a 23 or 24 game winning streak coming into our place, and they're fixed to make Jim Rowland, or the athletic director, that night was named the stadium after him. And so I'm a little nervous. I mean, these guys ain't been beat. We played an unbelievable game that night in 2009, and then, beat them, upset them. We go to Bryant, beat them. We're a fifth seed. I think we're the only fifth seed to ever go to the state finals. I get tickled. The coach is going, well, we don't need to take, just need to take 4. Well, I always like to tell them, buddy, that's 5. Okay.
Yeah.
And we got to the finals, and we go to play Bryant first round, beat them, then go up to Bentonville. And I'm thinking, God, those guys are going to be pissed off. I mean, we beat them, broke the streak, and we came back out and just kind of hit them in the mouth. And it was a great game. Got a guy open late and catches it, and we score and end up winning the game. Bentonville missed field goal. And then guess who we run into? A guy named Bray Cook in the Harvard Wildcats. And
well, it's funny you mentioned that, the story where you beat us in the semis. I remember it clear as day, that game, because right as that game ends, we throw a deep pass to try and score as time expires. We're 5 yards short, maybe, I think. Well, Don Strubing, turns to me as a sophomore and said, "All right, the keys are yours now."
Yeah.
It's like, all right, it's time. And then lo and behold, we see each other again a year later.
Yeah, we're sitting there. I think we played y'all regular season at Harbor, overtime. Coach Williams made another bad call in overtime. We ended up turning it over down there. I catch heck about that deal. We put a play in. I went to clinic and put a play in just for that defense.
Sure.
That year, nobody believed whatever, and I called it, and I don't think anybody on the staff was for it. And I called, and we ended up turning it over to the regular season. Y'all beat us in overtime. Then, of course, we get to the finals. And y'all were just defensively, God, just so big and strong. And it's funny is we practiced the quarterback sneak really hard that week, and we blocked. I mean, who blocks 2 punts? We blocked 2 punts against y'all in that game and still lost the freaking game. So that tells you at the end of the day, y'all were better than us that day, and y'all were better than us that year.
Well, that defense, you talk about Eric Pierce and Houston Pruitt, some of those guys, Bundrick playing linebacker, and a great secondary. I mean, that defense was
strong up the middle, man. Yeah. Strong up the middle, and they were really good. And Bentonville had great. I mean, there were some great football teams down there. I mean, there was a lot of good football teams in our league. There's good teams down there, and but something about that playoffs, man. Even I'm out of it, man. Those playoffs start up are just, it's like new life. Everybody's 0-0. It don't make a crap what you've done the last 10 weeks. It's all about what you're doing on that Friday night. And I think if you can't get excited as a staff going in on a Sunday preparing for a playoff game, and I don't care who you're playing, and they might be a lot better than you, but all the tricks come out. It's there's special teams plays and those things, and you find ways to win in different ways in the playoffs and keep them fresh, man. I think that to me, that's the teams that still want to practice and get better that time of year are the ones that go. You've seen it. I mean, there's a lot of great teams that don't get to the finals or don't make a long run in the playoffs because they're sick of practicing. And the teams that practice, that want to still practice week 12, week 13, and get better, those are the teams that are going to make long runs. And you just watch the teams that have great programs. They make those long playoff runs. Well, 4 weeks, that's nothing but an extra spring practice. And so I think you see the teams with the long runs, and they're traditionally pretty good just because they get that extra practice time and stuff.
And I think you're absolutely right. And then that goes into, the love of the game, but also, the love for your teammates.
Yeah.
And just being around, the locker room, like you mentioned, being as excited as a staff. Now, though you mentioned several, huge moments in your career, what are some of the special games that you remember, or special plays, or is there any stories you'd like to tell?
Oh, there's all kinds of stories.
Sure.
There's all kinds of stories. One of my favorite stories is on Tad Stewart, and I'll tell it. We're playing Bentonville in 2009, and Coach Stewart is he's in charge of short yardage goal line.
Sure.
Okay, and Bentonville, I mean, they're we're behind a little bit all night. It's back and forth a little bit, and it's a defensive game. And it's fourth down in long ways, and our quarterback drops back, Hunter Horton. And they're Bentonville's corner he messed up. I even know the guy. He's good boy. End up intercepting us 3 times next year. But we throw a deep ball. We catch it. There's nobody around him, and he's running. And it's Thomas Mears, played with a torn ACL, catches the ball and gets drugged down, tears the other ACL, gets drugged down on the 1 yard line. And Coach Lundy does a smart thing. Time's running out, so he calls timeout to save time because obviously we're probably going to score. He doesn't want us to milk the time. Well, we come to the sidelines, and if you know Tad Stewart, he's pretty. He's the typical old line guy. He's loud, he's brash, and so the whole 9 yards. So we get over there, and everybody's really calm. Everybody is calm. Players, coaches, but Coach Stewart is not calm. And so he starts screaming, "Everybody just calm down. Just calm down. Everybody just freaking calm down." And I look at him and I go, "Coach, I think you need to calm down. Everybody else is okay." And I'll never forget. And I said, "Well, what do you like?" "I don't care. Just get it in the end zone. Just get it in the end zone." And our quarterback, he's sitting back in the back. He had a real deep voice, didn't say a lot, Hunter. And he goes, "Coach, I think the quarterback sneak will work." And I said, "Great idea." And all of a sudden, Coach Stewart goes, "I want those guys blown completely in the band." Just loose. And I'm going, calm down. It's just funny in those moments how those things happen. We end up scoring and winning the game. There's all kinds of crazy moments. It's all about the locker room. How many times you've been in, we'll call play, "Hey, boys," I've looked at referees and said, "This is going to be real good or real bad," or "This is going to happen." And, those little catchphrase, moments with a referee or assistant coach. There's, I've played Bentonville, something about Bentonville. It's third and 8, and they threw a hitch. It's cold and wet. And he's going to catch it. I'm upset because we're giving too much cushion. Boom. They throw the ball. It goes through the kid's hand, hits me square in the eyeball. And I got looks like a bit, the old commercial, the bitter beer face.
Sure.
That is what I got. And I'm in some pain. And everybody's kids behind me, they're about to just die laughing. I know. And I'm going, "Oh, my God. What is going on? This is hurting." And I'll never forget Keith Fimple walking by me and goes, "Boy, it looked like that hurt. We'll talk about that. We'll laugh about that later." Right in the middle. Those things are the what I think what makes football great and athletics great. Those stories with different kids and different situations, and those are just a lot of fun. A lot of great guys to work with.
Now, you met a lot of very important, very special people throughout your career. And obviously, with this podcast, we've had a lot of them on and been able to ask some questions. And the questions we asked them, about how to run a successful program, how to do the things, really how to do what you just accomplished by getting into the Hall of Fame. And they all have their different answers. But one of the things that all these people have in common is you on this podcast. You're the reason they come on here and they sit down and they talk ball with people like us. What would your advice be to another coach aspiring to be in the position you're in now?
Find the guy in the back row. Me and Rick Jones were talking about this. When I went to clinic or went to spring practice, I'm trying to find that GA because he's got the information. He's got the key to the saddle or assistant coach, things like that. We had Mike Norvell on. Met Mike Norvell as a GA. Kept up with Mike Norvell. Guy's sharp. I like smart people. We've had Eli Drinkwich on. Those people that sit in that back row are those guys they're the ones that got the answers. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that the staff doesn't or the head coach, but I like to dig in. Okay, what's your practice schedule look like? What's the meeting room look like? That part of it. And building those relationships, and I've got to Mike Norvell's a GA and he's the head coach at Florida State. I mean, though you would love to watch those guys grow. And like I said, Coach Rester, we went to clinics all over the nation. I mean, we'd at least go to 4 or 5 clinics, and Coach was really good about that. We'd go to the Alabama clinic. Back when Houston Nutt used to have a clinic up there, we'd go to this at Glazier's. And I'd make connections with those guys, get a phone number. It's back before cell phones or texting. You had to get on the deal. I remember calling Art Kehoe, the offensive line coach for the Miami Hurricanes, but was in there with Jimmy Johnson. I mean, he's on every 30 for 30 there is. I call Art Kehoe. I was at a clinic in Atlanta, and we're fixing to play Fort Smith Southside. I was at El Dorado. They ran the same defense, 8-man front, bear front, a lot on first down. And us in Miami were similar. I make a phone call, and that guy talks to me for 2.5 hours on one play, on what they do, or 2 plays on what hurts it. You don't think I ain't following that guy around wherever I'm going? You better believe it. I owe him for life. And you build those. Don't be afraid to call people. We get in this deal where, I don't know if I should talk to that guy. He's a big. Hey, that guy was just like you at one time. He's just like anybody. He puts his pants on like everybody else. I don't care who he is. And if I could get information, I was going to get it, because it was going to try whatever we could do to help our program. And it didn't matter if I had to drive somewhere or stay up all night, wait till everybody's done, whatever I had to do to get connected with that person to get the information to help our program, I was going to do it. And our coaching staff was like that. And I think that's where you learn, man. You learn. I mean, when you sit at clinics, we were there last year, fixed to do a podcast, and the night before we're setting all this up, the funnest part was there's Todd Cooley down there, Zach Clark, there's Coach Leader from Russellville, and we're collaborating, just talking ball. Might be from what you do in the weight room to what you're doing on third down, what you're doing in the red zone. To me, that's what gets me going, and I could sit there and talk ball all day long and talk about people's team. I get tickled. Most coaches just want to talk about their team. You let them talk, they'll tell you everything you want to, and you get all the information you need from them. And I'd find out about defense coordinators, how they were in the office, or hey, that player, he might be their best player. He don't like to practice all the time. Those little things like that, I think you build those relationships, but you're always trying to gather information to make yourself better.
Sure. And now you mentioned earlier in the podcast, it's very important to have good administrators. Well, you're a good administrator. What are some of the things that you've done in your new role to help your coaches?
Well, and that was different for me. Going into that role, I was ready for it. You think you do, but being an athletic director, it opened my eyes to other things. I was athletic coordinator at Southside, but I really wasn't the AD. I'd run the booster club and did some things. Coach Rowland called me to, get workers for the track meet or whatever. That's about the extent of it. But opened my eyes up to other coaches and watching them coach. And I love watching coaches coach. I don't care if they're coaching swim and dive. I don't care if they're coaching basketball, football. A coach can coach, and I can tell pretty quick if they can or they can't. And my deal is all the people, just we're talking about going in the Hall of Fame, most of those people on that wall down there, AAA office or in the Hall of Fame, I've ran across one way or other. And they helped me on the way. Guys like Marion Glover, who was at Pine Bluff, won all kinds of state championships. And sitting down, how do you win a state championship, Coach? Having that question with that guy. Rick Jones is here, talking to him about organization. Different. Barry Lunny. You can sit there and I could name, all kinds of Buck James, Bobby Boulding, Brad, those guys, Billy Elmore, Bo Emery, those guys I grew up with, but those older guys, Tommy Tyson, guys like that, they helped you on the way, and I want to give back because I try to see things, but I always tell them I ain't coaching their team. If I want to coach your team, I'd go get my own, and I just believe in that. If you ain't the coach, you don't need to be coaching them. But if they ask, I like giving little tidbits on, might do a little this and do a little that. not really X's and O's wise, more probably culture or organization of things. And the main thing is I want them to be able to help somebody else down the road also when I'm gone.
Mm-hmm. Well, Coach, we've gone over a lot of things. You're a Hall of Famer. Is there anything else that you want to talk about to sum this thing up?
Well, and I do. I want to thank, first of all, my family. I got the best wife in the world. Coach Linda, she's supportive, and we go, and we're at a ball game here or there all the time, and my family, my mom, and she got to be there, and she's still alive and doing good, and my sisters, and I got a nephew that's a coach. He's coaching. He's defense. Clayton Pankey's defense coordinator at Conway, and our family was about football. I mean, I say that's not all true. I mean, we're bigger than that, but that's a big part of our lives. But all the men, all the coaches, assistant coaches like you, I mean, we got to work together 1 year, but I had sisters growing up, and those assistant coaches were my brothers, every one of them. And everyone that's ever worked for me or I've worked with, I viewed them as my brother. And I try to keep up with every one of them that I come across. And if they called me, I'd run to help, and I'd do it in a minute. And something about staffs, and I'll say this too, and I heard Bill Parcells say this. We won a state championship in 2006, and when you win those championships and things, they're big, but being a part of a team, you're together forever. And every team changes, and you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Every year your team changes. Even I don't care. We got 24 returning lettermen and 11 starters back on offense and defense. That team's still going to be different. Mm-hmm. And every team is different. And I know this, every kid has a story. I used to get the seniors in after that at the end of the year and set them up in there and go, you tried to quit twice, and we kept you out here, and you end up being all conference. Those stories I like to bring up, but let them remember those. Everybody has a story on how they got there. And I got a story on how I got there and that part of it. But all the assistant coaches, of course, the players. I mean, they had some great players in at El Dorado and Southside, Pea Ridge, and God, I mean, and you talked about administrators. Never worked for a bad one. I mean, I'm worked for Jim Rowland, Wayne Haver, Benny Good, Bob Watson at El Dorado. I mean, these guys they had a Hall of Fame for administrators. Well, Coach Rowland's in. He's a Hall of Fame athletic director. Every one of those guys would be first ballot guys. How lucky am I? I mean, the good Lord put me in places where I needed to be, where I might not even thought I needed to be there, but took care of me and put me in situations. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. And I wake up and know that every day. And but man, something about this time of year though, you can smell that football coming on. It's that time of year, and man, it gets my juices going, no doubt.
Sure. Well, Coach, I think it's been an awesome, a little different
That is
interview.
a little different. I mean, I'm used to asking the questions.
It's
kind of strange deal. But I'll say this too: is I've had a lot of fun doing this podcast. I mean, with you and Brent, and then of course Daryl Fimple coming on board here full time, Triple Crown. But the work that we put in on this, especially you with all the graphics thing, we've become a family a little bit, and it's been a lot of fun doing this because a lot of these guys, are my friends, but some of them are telling me stories I didn't know about, and some of these stories that need to be told. And there's people, and there's a guy we're going to have eventually on the podcast named Maurice Cawthorn, and people, his story needs to be told. I mean, he played for the New York Giants, a two-time Super Bowl winner, played for Bill Parcells, was, coach for Parcells. To me, that story needs to be told, and that's our job.
Mm-hmm. Nope, I love it. Well, Coach, congratulations. An amazing career, and obviously still rolling, and hopefully some success with this podcast. It continues to grow. But Hall of Famer, Jeff Williams.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for having me. And ladies and gentlemen, it's been the last time we talk about me. We'll get somebody on here you want to really hear about. So, Anyway.
Well, I guess for Jeff Williams and Coach Cook and Brent, who's on assignment, thanks for watching.